There was an anonymous player poll that came out, and the players voted Tyrese as the most overrated player in the league.
The whole thing's bullshit. Okay.
Timeout. Carlisle's going to let him play. Halliburton steps back and hits. Tyrese Halliburton trying to take Cleveland's heart.
I'm going to be honest with you. The Indiana Pacers, whether you call them strength of schedule merchants, call them overrated, call them young, call them untalented, call them pretenders, you can call them whatever they want because they are beginning to prove that they belong at the top of this Eastern Conference. If you would have told me last year during Halliburton's pathetic start to the season that they'd be here, if you were to tell me 3 months ago before their massive winning streak at the end of the season that they'd be here, hell, if you were to tell me 5 days ago before this series even began that the Indiana Pacers would be here up 2-0 going back to Indiana on the 1-seeded Cavaliers, I would tell you you're an idiot with zero ball knowledge, and yet it turns out I'm the idiot all along. Just listen to me. The X factor in this series is honestly Siakam. If Siakam can slow Giannis down, which he has done once before the season, then the Pacers will win in 5. The Pacers are on the brink of their second straight Eastern Conference Finals, and it's coming off the back of a player who got overrated allegations, proceeded to regress so much early in the season that he lost his all-star status, and then came out in these playoffs as if he were the reincarnation of 2010 Chris Paul with T-Mac level scoring and confidence. It's completely unprecedented. Last year, everyone, including me, thought that the Pacers ECF run was a complete fluke, and yet here we are again a year later and standing exactly where we stood a year ago, and with the Celtics playing the way they did in Game 1, missing all those shots and playing horrible isolation ball, with Tatum completely forgetting that he's 6'10" and unable to buy a bucket. It's at this point in time where I lean back in my chair and wonder, are the Pacers about to make the NBA Finals? And better yet, how? Is depth really the end-all be-all in today's parody NBA? Is having a star that rests comfortably in between elite playmaker and ball-dominant volume scorer with a supporting cast of 3-and-D guys the recipe to success out east? It's funny I say that because we saw this exact formula 4 years ago take a young and experienced Hawks team and Trae Young on the run of a lifetime right after the bubble. That being said, that run is definitely considered a fluke, so is this run a fluke too by that formula? Will the Pacers proceed to fizzle out and lose this series to the Cavs? Will they have the chance to make a finals, or will they be another 76ers and Hawks-esque team that floats around the edge of greatness year after year? Are we witnessing a rare back-to-back fluke postseason from the Pacers thanks to injury luck, or is it time we put on our analytical trends and biases aside and acknowledge the genuine Eastern Conference juggernaut and Hall of Famer in the making right before our eyes? Before I answer all of that and more, and before we get into all of those questions, I want to take a moment to ask you all to subscribe. We're trying to hit 10K by the end of the finals, and speaking of finals, my schedule is absolutely packed, so I'd appreciate it if you could help out a young buck and hit that little red button for absolutely free. Alright, with all the mandatory begging out of the way, let's get to talking about the Pacers. First of all, I'd like to address the fluke allegations, and to do this, we'll address each of their Halliburton-era playoff series based on how fraudulent it was on a scale of 1 to 10. Last year, they played against basically the weaker Trailblazer teams, as there was no Giannis for that series in round 1, so this gets a 10 out of 10 on the fraud scale. But then they proceeded to play against the Knicks, who weren't nearly as good as they are this year with Cat and McCall, and they had the blessing of one of the most outrageous shooting performances in the history of an NBA half with that first half of Game 7 against the Knicks, so I'll give this one a 3 out of 10 on the fraud scale, but it was still a little bit fraudulent for a second round matchup. When they finally reached some competition, however, they got dismantled in an embarrassing fashion by the Celtics, and so that run ended with yet another 10 on the fraud scale. For the most part, the run was an absolute fluke that was fueled by the injuries of their opponent's best players and contributors. When we fast forward and apply that same scale to this season, and with Dame out with a blood clot, Kyle Kuzma playing like Tony Snell, and Dame eventually coming back to some of the worst basketball we've seen from him in his entire career, it's easy to blame this one on injury. Who knows what would have happened if Dame was healthy for the entire series round 1 against the Bucks this year. Hell, the Bucks were so close to winning that Game 5, and had they won, it's not outlandish to say they pull off the 3-1 comeback with how well Giannis was playing, and with them being able to prove that they can perform on the road just as well as they can perform at home in that hypothetical Game 7 scenario in Indiana. The Bucks just ran out of time with Dame's injury. I'll give this an 8 on the fraud scale. Then we get into this series, and in the first 2 games, the Pacers have been trailing by quite a bit before coming back in the dying embers of the game thanks to Halliburton. No disrespect to that UVA legend Ty Jerome, he's arguably had a more impactful season than Hallie in the grand scheme of the NBA, but I'm sorry Ty, you were simply not made for this life. But then we get into Game 3, and the key starters that were sorely missed of Darius Garland and Evan Mobley came back, and the Pacers felt the heat instantaneously. As soon as the Pacers' second unit took over in the second quarter, the Cavs amassed a lead that was just unsurmountable, and the Pacers couldn't hold them off to come back from it. They got dismantled in a 20-point blowout at home. All of a sudden, it seemed like their fluke, injury luck, and fraud ways were finally being exposed. Finally, the team that's supposed to beat them is healthy again, and now it's time for their trip to Cancun. But then Game 4 happened.
Here comes Siakam, stops on it down. He's starting to cook.
I remember I was at work yesterday and snuck a look over at my phone to check up on how the fraud Pacers were dropping Game 4 at home and losing the series in 6, but imagine my shock when I checked my screen to see that it was halftime and the Pacers were up by 41 points. Seriously, since Garland and Mobley returned and the Cavs cruised to the easiest victory of the series thus far on the road, it seemed like the Pacers' fluke run was a done deal. Hell, I stopped editing this very video that you're watching after Game 3 because I thought it was a dead topic and the Pacers were done for. But now I sit here looking at the series with the Pacers up 3-1, wondering, okay, if it isn't injuries, then now what? Now what is making the Pacers continue to blow better teams out each night? And to figure this out, there's no better place to look for our answer than in the fateful Game 4 versus the Cavs. More specifically, in that legendary second quarter where the Pacers demolished them in historic fashion. As you watch, I want you to witness what I and many others have been beginning to dub the decoy offense for the Indiana Pacers. To begin the quarter, the Pacers had built up a serviceable 15-point lead, but it was a lucky first quarter where they dominated the boards and got bailed by a bunch of Cavs missed threes. Jared Allen even said it himself.
Just being more aggressive on the boards, trying to box out our guys and just getting the ball at the end of the day.
We've seen this in the series before go south for the Pacers eventually, and so it was only a matter of time before the Pacers, with Halliburton on the bench to start the quarter, gave up some more buckets and the game became competitive again. Except the opposite happened. You see, the biggest misconception about the Indiana Pacers is that they need Tyrese Halliburton on the floor to win basketball games. And while the world argues about if he's a great genius playmaker or the most overrated star in the league, the Pacers are quietly housing a playmaking and offensive genius who is just as much of a star defensively. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to argue that the Pacers operate behind their true star, their hidden star of Pascal Siakam.
Indiana built a 19-point lead early. Siakam fires and Billy's a corner three.
Pascal Siakam gets none of the limelight that Halliburton does, when in reality, he is this team's engine. To start this quarter, his offensive game was just too much for Dean Wade to handle on the ISO. This man was getting exposed because he feared the size that Siakam posed on a drive to the cup, so sagging off let Siakam make these easy-ass buckets. But then the Cavs adjusted and put the best defender on the planet on Siakam, who virtually can never sag off thanks to his length. And so how does Pascal Siakam respond? By faking a shot to continue to draw in the defense, leading to a go-ahead assist on Obi Toppin. On the next possession, Cleveland could have got a much better contest on this layup with multiple defenders, but again, Siakam caused the fear of a kick out into the paint to him, so he drew defenders away from this layup. The next possession, Dean Wade collapses yet again, and the Pacers are now on an 18-9 run with no Tyrese Halliburton on the floor yet in the quarter. Then, when Halliburton eventually does check in, the Pacers are playing the clunky Cavs at their blazing speeds and take advantage of a 4-on-5 scenario where Halliburton makes the genius no-look pass to draw DeAndre Hunter just out of range of Miles Turner, since he's worried about the corner closeout since they're down a man. That hesitation leading to a lazy defensive recovery on a much bigger Miles Turner, which will almost always result in a foul. And Halliburton knew that regardless of where he threw this pass, the Pacers were coming away with 3 points. Do you see what I mean by a decoy offense? The Pacers make you worry about all these other factors when the truth is, behind their limited star power is a bunch of players who can lock down on defense and fit perfectly into Rick Carlisle's unique fast-paced ball-swinging offense. If a team wants to worry about Hallie's perimeter shot making, perfect, here comes Siakam. If a team wants to worry about Siakam and trap him on the perimeter, perfect, he's savvy enough to make a play. What about Miles Turner? Cool, he's savvy enough to make a play. Andrew Nembhard, he's savvy enough to make a play. And if all else fails, throw it to TJ McConnell, who will almost certainly bang you a 3 every time. The Pacers are a dying breed of basketball, the one true team left in the NBA who won't ever match up against any of these upper teams in star power, but they have the prestige to appear like they can and will win the game with 2 times your luck and 10 times your grit. Don't get me wrong, the Pacers aren't out of the woods just yet, and the Cavs have more than enough star power and ball players to come back from down 3-1 and win this series, but a game 5 against the Pacers when you're down 3-1 and only outclass them star-wise? The Bucks had to learn that lesson the hard way. twice. And maybe Halliburton, Siakam, and the crew have one more student left to teach. Thank you for watching and subscribe. It's free.